What is up, y'all? It's your boy DSD, and we're here with another edition of our YouTube today. Today's Thursday, so that means I'm giving you my hottest take, hottest opinion. It's coming out right off the chest, and it's going to be about the most talked about event this past weekend. Jake Paul knocking out Nate Robinson, and a ton of people have called out Jake Paul. And I'm going to be breaking down who he should be fighting next. So stay tuned for that. And as always, please make sure you subscribe down below. Give it a like because we need you to grow. We really appreciate it. So stay tuned for the video. It's your boy DSD, and we're live again on a Thursday. And as always, it is an Opinion Thursday. So Jake Paul just absolutely waxed Nate Robinson. Poor guy. I mean, honestly, I really thought that Nate Robinson had an opportunity to win that fight. I really did. But he didn't. Clearly. Jake Paul actually showed out. I gotta tell you, I'm not a big fan of Jake Paul. I respect the guy, but at the end of the day, he is kind of a, weenie a little bit. But he knocked out a professional athlete. The narrative was that Jake Paul couldn't fight anyone. The first guy he fought was a YouTuber. Then Nate Robinson called him out and said, "Oh, you wouldn't be able to beat up an athlete." Well, he did in short order and knocked him the F out. It was pretty bad, and I felt really bad for Nate Robinson, actually. So now that Jake Paul actually showed his stuff, he's calling out the likes of, like, Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. Like, obviously, it's just a clout piece, but, like, I'd like to see some of these fights. I really do think that Jake Paul actually has an opportunity to fight some good people. And I get a list right here of who I would like to see him fight. There's been a few people who have called him out. Okay, so let's go over this list. Danis, who's the worst. He's the worst. We'll get into him in a second. Evander Kane, NHL player. Ben Askren, UFC fighter. Jorge Masvidal, who's also a UFC fighter. And then Evan Turner, who's an NBA player. Some of them haven't, like, quote-unquote called them out. It's just, like, they tweeted something, so I just kind of, like, made a hypothetical here and see how we're going to move forward with it. So let's start with Danis. This one makes the most sense to me right off the cuff. I hate this guy. He's the worst. He's just the worst. He comments on every video. He thinks he beat up everyone. He's, like, in Bellator or something. He whacked me. He rocked me. I'm not saying that, but against actual professional fighters, he's the worst, and honestly, I would just love to see him lose. But he's in Conor McGregor's camp, so he's also a part of that, like, that McGregor squad, but Danis is very good. But Danis would be a great fight for Jake Paul because, honestly, people might be rooting for Jake Paul in that fight because Danis is the worst. Like, let me just reiterate it. He's just the worst. I'm not a Danis guy. So, I would actually like to see that fight because it'd be boxing. And if it was UFC, MMA, obviously, or, Bellator, wherever Danis is right now, I don't even know if he even has a contract with Bellator, it would just be not fair. He would probably wax Jake Paul. But in a boxing match, it might be a little different. So, I would like to see that. I think Danis would be a really good one. That's just my opinion. Okay, so number 2 is Evander Kane, who plays on the San Jose Sharks, and he called out Jake Paul, saying that he was bad fighting a good athlete because he felt bad for Nate Robinson, basically. And then he just called out Logan Paul, and then Logan Paul had a pretty funny bit saying that, like, who's that? Like, well, I mean, Evander Kane's kind of like, I like the NHL, but he's kind of irrelevant. I mean, I'm just being honest. He kind of is. He's a good player, but, it's just not exactly someone that Jake Paul would be fighting for clout because 90% of the people wouldn't know who he was. I want to take a little step here, take a step back here for a second, and just acknowledge how famous Jake Paul is. So I thought Nate Robinson was going to be the most popular guy in this fight. I really did. I just, maybe didn't understand totally. I just, wasn't paying attention or something along those lines. I would say out of 10 people, only 2 knew who Nate Robinson was. I was stunned. I really was. So, honestly, I give Jake Paul a ton of credit. He looked great and knocked out a professional athlete, which obviously is older, but Nate Robinson's no slouch. Like, He's a stud athlete. One of the best athletes in the NBA. Like, he won the dunk contest 3 times. He's literally 5'8" or 5'9" or something along those lines. He's short, and he was able to do all that. So, pretty impressive stuff if you ask me. So, Evander Kane wants to fight them. You know, I don't really know why he wants to do that. I think he'd get washed, to be honest, because he doesn't even fight. He plays hockey professionally still. He's not even retired. So, I'm not even sure when he would, you know, actually do the fight. Or even train or anything along those lines. He would only have a couple months. That's not a good fight for Jake Paul. That's a lose-lose for him because, honestly, like, Evander Kane's not even big enough for him to be on a spectrum, if you just ask me, honestly. So far, Dylan Danis is the only one that makes sense to me. So then KSI, I guess, called out Jake Paul, or there was, like, rumblings of KSI calling him out because he fought Logan. KSI did, and then KSI beat Logan. So I'd like to see that, I guess. Like, it's just like a YouTube fight. It'd be, you know, interesting because Jake Paul is obviously a better boxer than Logan. I mean, it's just pretty obvious at this point. And I think Jake Paul has put more into it than Logan. So I'd like to see that. Like, that'd be I guess, a quote-unquote good one to have at the, you know, at the very least. So I'm going to trickle a good one in there. I guess that, like, Floyd Mayweather is calling out the Pauls. I don't really know why he would want to do that, Floyd Mayweather, because that's obviously a huge win for either of the Pauls. They want to fight Floyd Mayweather, so you're going to get like $100 million. And what happens if Floyd Mayweather loses, which I know it's not very likely for that to happen, but if he loses to one of the Pauls, that would be pathetic, embarrassing, and then that would just make the Logan Paul, Jake Paul train just choo-choo. That would just be going for the fences. That's never, ever going to get out of their headspace. They beat arguably the greatest fighter ever. So it's not a good move for Floyd Mayweather. I would not do that, and it's just not a good move. So if you're Jake Paul, you should do it. If you're Floyd Mayweather, do not even touch that with a 10-foot pole. That's just my opinion on it. And not to mention the fact that you're completely out of your prime. I'm not saying he's a great fight. He's not. He's probably still a great fighter, right? He probably still has all these great attributes. Don't do it. Not a good idea. Okay, next guy is Ben Askren. This would also be a good one. So Ben Askren is a UFC fighter that most recently got KO'd by Jorge Masvidal with that flying knee, which was like the most devastating thing of all time. I mean, like, honestly, I felt horrible for him because Ben Askren never really had an opportunity in the UFC, but he's a very, you know, he has a lot of wins. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not totally sure, but I think that he fought for the Bellator, and he was one of the champions there for years. Actually, I'm just going to fact check that really quick. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, he was a amateur wrestler. He was a former Bellator and one welterweight champion before he fought in the UFC. So he's had multiple belts with different fighting organizations. So he's definitely like a collegiate fighter. And Jake Paul called him out saying, you got knocked out in 3 seconds. Like, he did. But this would be a great one because I'm not saying Ben Askren's a bum by any means because he's not, but he's a little older. So this would be a really good get into the boxing world for Jake Paul fighting actual fighters. Because I'm not sure Ben Askren's a great fighter. He's an excellent wrestler. If it was a UFC atmosphere or an MMA or whatever, any type of, you know, octagon, no. Jake Paul would get destroyed and he would never take that fight. Boxing, though, I do think that Jake Paul has an opportunity to win that one. I really do, and I think that would be a good fight for both squads, and Ben Askren will get a ton of clout for that. Even if he loses, his career is over. I'm pretty sure he's just doing, like, commentating right now. I think that that'd be a great fight for both sides, and at the end of the day, like, that'd be sexy for both sides. It may not sell the most, like, you know, the Floyd Mayweathers of the world, but it would be Jake Paul fighting an actual professional fighter, so that's something I would tune in for, absolutely. Next one is Jake Paul called out Jorge Masvidal. Like, come on. Like, that's not even a good fight for any side. Like, Jorge Masvidal would crucify him. Like, honestly, I think that Jorge Masvidal is the baddest dude on the planet sometimes. Like, no. I don't even want that. It's a bad look for Masvidal to be taking on that fight. And for Jake Paul, 90% of these are good fights for him because it's a good clout setter. And that'd be great for him, but not good for everyone else. Jorge Masvidal should not be fighting Jake Paul. Because once again, if Jake Paul beats Jorge Masvidal, that's a career ender. It really is. You just can't get worse than that. And I really like Jorge Masvidal, so I don't want him to lose to Jake Paul. Then the next one is Evan Turner. Evan Turner is an NBA player. He called out Jake Paul, said, I wanted to fight Jake Paul or something. Dude, he's like 6'8" or something like that, but Jake Paul would wash him. He just would. Yeah. Evan Turner just signed a deal to be like a Celtics assistant coach. Like, I like Evan Turner a lot. Like, I'm a Celtics fan, all these things, but Jake Paul would do bad things to you. We don't want that. We really don't. Like, I just don't want that to happen for you. And I think he's like in his 30s. It's just not. No, please don't do that. We'll just move on to the next guy, and Evan Turner shouldn't be doing that. This is not a good fight for Jake Paul because Evan Turner is like a borderline washed up NBA player. He wants to fight professional athletes that are like either in their prime or someone that is just like a really good fighter and that's just like a professional boxer. Doesn't need to be like a great one, but just an actual boxer. That's what Jake Paul needs to do. So the last one is Conor McGregor. I think Jake Paul calling out Conor McGregor is the best thing Jake Paul could ever do. Okay? Follow me here. The reason why I think that is because Conor McGregor is a great fighter. Don't get me wrong. But he's a showman first. And Jake Paul is probably a great fighter too. But he's a showman first. They would sell so many pay-per-views. Like arguably as many as the Floyd Mayweather, maybe not as many, but in that market, you'd be getting like $100 million, like some crazy amount of money. But on the contrary, that is just like, you can't get lower than that for Conor McGregor, okay? I don't really want it to happen because it's a lose-lose for Conor. It's the same thing as Conor fighting Floyd Mayweather, and no matter what happened, Conor was going to come out winning in that situation. He made his money. He fought Floyd Mayweather. You know, if he even like gave him a fight, was even better. If he won, it's just Floyd Mayweather would never end. It will never end for him. It's the same thing here. If Jake Paul beats Conor McGregor, that would be the worst thing for the sport ever, and Jake Paul would just be like riding high for the rest of his life. It's just my honest opinion. So the sports fan in me doesn't want to see it because it's not going to be entertaining. It's going to be just like all drama. The fight's going to probably suck. And if Jake Paul wins, it's going to be the worst. But in the drama side of things, yes, we would love to see that because the build up to that fight would be amazing. So much trash talk, so many things like just going too far, you know, talking about people's moms, like, oh, it would be great. It would be great theater. But it would not be a great look for Conor McGregor. I'm just being honest with you. So, to do a high level, I want Jake Paul to fight Dylan Danis. Like, that is who I want. That would be perfect. Dylan Danis is like kind of in his prime, I guess. He talks all this trash. Everyone hates him. And everyone hates Jake Paul. But Dylan Danis is worse. Trust me, he is. So this could be like a winning situation for Jake Paul because he gets someone who actually is universally less liked than Jake Paul. Jake Paul is known by more people, so more people might dislike Jake Paul. But the amount of people that know Dylan Danis, I don't know if he has any fans. It's just like, I just don't know. I just don't think so. So, yeah. I would love to see that. I would actually be rooting heavy for Jake Paul, which is actually crazy to say. That would be my guy, and I think Jake Paul would probably win. That's my honest opinion. So, as always, guys, I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun with this one. I'm going to try to do more stuff like this every Thursday, more opinion stuff. But, yeah, it's a good shakeup. I think it's kind of fun. So, as always, make sure you subscribe down below, comment, let me know how I did. Everything's starting to coming together here. The background's getting better, the mic's getting better, the setup's getting better, and that's all thanks to you guys, and it gives me motivation to keep doing this. So, thank you so much, and I think I said it before, but make sure you subscribe down below. It'd mean the world to me, and I really love you guys. So, enjoy the rest of your day.